travel around the world to many different countries. People ask me questions all the time about how to best teach our very young learners how to begin reading and writing in English, which is not, their students' first or native language. So we're going to talk about some different ways that you can engage your young learners in reading and writing. Okay, so before we begin, I have a little poll here. And I'm going to ask you to choose the one that most appropriately defines you. This way, we can all see who is here on this webinar and what do you do, right? So I'm going to start the poll, and you're going to tell us who you are. Here we go. Okay, so are you a pre-primary teacher, a primary teacher, secondary teacher, a university professor, perhaps you're a teacher trainer, and perhaps you're an English teacher in training and you're studying very hard to learn how to teach English to young learners. And maybe there's a few others. If you're in that other category, you could maybe type in the chat box how you would identify yourself. Yeah, we have quite a range. We have people who are pre-primary teachers, secondary, university professors, teacher trainers, but it seems like the more of you, right, 17% are primary teachers. Well, whether or not you're a primary teacher or pre-primary teacher, I hope that you will find this information that I'm going to share with you about literacy instruction for young EFL learners very interesting and helpful. Sometimes even if you're not teaching pre-primary teachers or pre-primary students, understanding how our young learners learn to read and write can sometimes help you as you start to have these students later on if you understand what types of instruction they are given. All right. Okay. All right. So can you see the results of the poll now? You can see that 18% of you are primary teachers. And then the next highest is teacher trainer. Okay, so you're probably here because you are training teachers of young learners. And then we have a range across the board. Okay, so we've got a really diverse group here. And like I said, I hope that no matter who you're teaching, you will find this information about literacy instruction for young EFL learners interesting and useful. So let's first start at the very beginning, right? And of course, we all know that literacy means the ability to read and write. And reading and writing is a very dynamic process of communication that requires certain skills and strategies for making meaning through interpretation and creation of printed text. So the process of learning to read and write, as you know, it usually begins in one's native language, or L1, and this is a process that cannot be acquired naturally like oral language proficiency. So we all know, right, when kids are growing up, they just pick up or acquire oral language proficiency, but reading and writing needs to be learned through formal instruction, which usually begins in early childhood. So of course, when children are learning a second or foreign language, such as English, learning to read and write is also a dynamic process that requires formal instruction. Okay, but the good news is that one only has to become literate once, because these skills in literacy are transferable from the first language to the second language. That is, this understanding of the connection of oral language to print. Okay, so it's been well established that skills used in reading and writing in the native language can transfer to another language and serve as a foundation for literacy in a new language. The understanding of the relationship between oral language and written language and the strategies for making sense of printed text can be learned in L1 and then applied to literacy in the second or foreign language. In fact, Cummins noted in his work that the better developed the conceptual foundation of children's first language, the more likely children are to develop similarly high levels of conceptual abilities in their second language. So L1 literacy is certainly an asset for building literacy in English and should be supported. Very important. So, of course, in second language contexts where students are likely receiving instruction in school in English, okay, and might be learning their L1 to varying degrees, very important. Of course, most of you are in a foreign language context and should be learning, of course, literacy in both languages simultaneously. So one thing that we want to think about, though, is that for very young learners, maybe who are under 7, maybe they're even in preschool, so 4 or 5 years old, they are still building their literacy skills in their native language, right? So something that we have to keep in mind is that as our little ones are learning literacy in their first language, if we are starting English language instruction earlier and earlier, then we have to think about, okay, what are some considerations for literacy instruction when kids are very young age, when they're just starting to recognize this connection between oral language and print, right? And so I have a picture here, if you can see, which shows some parents who are reading a story to their little girl. Does this look familiar to many of you? Do you also read stories to your kids before they go to bed? Yeah, I see people talking about, yes, reading before bedtime, very important. Yes. So there are all types of ways that we can get our students and our children ready to read at a young age. This notion of reading readiness, right? Reading readiness, as we call it. There are all kinds of skills, right, that they can acquire through your interaction with them, like even the understanding of a book being something that, let's say I take a book that you open up, right, in this way for English, okay, and that, you can turn the page to get to the next set of words, right, and pictures. Even just this understanding of what a book is, right, can naturally happen if you are reading to your children at a very young age. Always keep in mind, though, that not every student has the same experience. And so you may want to make sure that you know whether or not your young learners are being read storybooks at home or being told stories at home, because not everybody comes from the same traditions. Not all parents have time to always read books to kids every night. So you might want to check, because that might affect how well students are being able to build their literacy skills in school if they're not having this type of background experience when they come into the classroom. Okay, so the shared book experience, starting with parents and continuing with teachers in early childhood, is very important. Now, we're going to talk about some different aspects of what I'm calling early literacy. And you might have heard other words like emerging literacy, emergent reading, emergent writing, early reading. Okay, there's many different names or ways to describe early literacy. This is one way you can name it. But the whole point is that early literacy means the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that precede learning to read and write in the primary grades. Okay, so this is talking about young children's grasp of print as a tool for making meaning and as a way to communicate, right, both oral and written language. So you see this is the stage where children, might be looking at a book, right? And they started to understand the skills and the knowledge of what a book is, and they may not be able to actually decode or read the words. But they might be, because they heard you tell the story, retelling the story based on the pictures that they recognize. Okay, so this is what we know as early literacy. You may not think they're reading, okay, but in fact, these are the early stages of literacy. Okay, so they're listening to stories being read aloud, right? They know how to orient their bodies and their minds, right, to these sort of technicalities of book and print. Okay, even as I said, when adults say, here, help me hold the book and turn the pages, you're teaching them the conventions of reading. Okay, so that is the early start of it. Okay, and so we want to make sure their early reading and writing learning is embedded in a larger developing system of oral communication. And early literacy is an emerging set of relationships between reading and writing. And so it would be very important for us to go over these terms. Okay, are you familiar with these terms? Phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. Are you familiar with these terms? I see yes, yes, yes. All right. So I actually have a poll. Okay, and I see people saying, I teach phonics all the time. Some people are saying, can you explain? I actually have a poll. Before we get into the terms, I want you to just to see if you know in detail what these terms mean. So, true or false? Phonological awareness and phonemic awareness are the same thing. True or false? Okay, I'm going to give you a poll. Okay, and I want you to choose true or false. Okay. All right. All right. Slowing down, I see about a third of you, no, almost 50% of you have answered. All right, get your answers in. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to close the voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, and I'm ending the voting. And now I'm going to share the results. And as you can see, most of you have said false. And of course, maybe it's not too tricky because what would I have to explain if they were just the exact same thing, right? But of course, this probably means that you're very aware of the differences between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Okay, so of course it's false. They're not the same thing. Okay. And phonological awareness is actually a broader term that includes phonemic awareness. Okay, so phonological awareness is a broader term. Okay, phonological awareness is talking about, being able to identify and manipulate larger parts of spoken language. So we're talking about like rhyming, right? Understanding the word, the entity of the word, syllables, and even alliteration, understanding that, you can recognize when words start with the same letter. And of course, let's go to the slide for phonological awareness here. Okay, so phonological awareness is the ability to recognize that words are made up of a variety of sound units. And the term encompasses a number of sound-related skills necessary for a person to develop as a reader. And as a child develops phonological awareness, she will not only come to understand the words are made up of small sound units, right, phonemes, right, that's the small unit, but also learns that words can be segmented into larger sound chunks, right? So those are known as syllables, those chunks. And each syllable will begin with a sound, which we call onset, Okay, and then ends with another sound, which is the rhyme, R-I-M-E, rhyme, right? This rhyme here. Okay, so basically phonological awareness, just understanding of these sounds, and it provides the basis for phonics instruction, right? And phonics is that understanding that the sound and print letters are connected. So this is the first step towards what we call reading. Okay, so you're probably very familiar with that. Okay, so phonological awareness is going to include word awareness, right? Also rhyming, that words rhyme. Okay, so like cat in the hat. And understanding like the onset and rhyme, right? You can recognize that certain words start with the same letter, okay, or maybe end with the same sounds. So, and phonemic awareness is, of course, one aspect of phonological awareness, okay? And that means that you're aware of the smallest units of sound in a word. You can segment them, blend them, manipulate the units. So the example I give you here is that you can hear 3 sounds in the word bat, right? B, a, t. Okay, so you can recognize there's these 3 sounds and they make up the word bat. So you can obviously see how this is the first sort of set of building blocks to be able to read, because you are understanding the sounds of the language. And in this case, the sounds of English. Alrighty, so here are some examples, of course, that are really great. Okay. I see, it's very interesting. I see somebody's, Hui Tran says that phonological awareness is a key skill that is under-practiced in Japan. Also that different languages have different sounds, right? So this first ability to recognize the sounds of English or the sounds of the foreign language is very important. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to then attach those sounds to the printed letters. Okay, so of course, that's why, you know, books like Dr. Seuss have been so popular in terms of building early literacy, is because when they're read to kids, they start to hear the rhythm of the language, and also there's lots of rhymes, right? So would you eat them in a box? Would you eat them with a fox? Okay, so there's many opportunities for teachers to be able to point out the sounds, right? But in a natural and fun way with a fun book. Okay, so this is, actually I happen to turn to this page, and you know, as you keep going on, right, I can read it to you. Not in a box, not with a fox, not in a house, not with a mouse. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. I would not eat green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Okay, so as you see, there's the rhythm, there's rhyming words, and this is a great way to be able to get, you know, your young EFL learners to be able to become familiar with the sounds of the language. And also, it's so much fun with the rhythm as well. Another book that's great. Are you familiar with Chicka Chicka Boom Boom? Who's familiar with Chicka Chicka Boom Boom? You can see here, this particular copy used to belong to my nephew, Benjamin Shin, right here. Yes, and so what I love about Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, first of all, you know, you students are starting to learn the letters of the alphabet, and I see people are saying their kindergarten students love it, right? Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Yes, this book is great. I'll just read the first couple pages. Right? So as you can see here, what's wonderful is it's fun. It's introducing the letters in a very fun and colorful way. And also there's like a repeated verse, so it makes it kind of like a song or a chant, right? So it starts like this. You see A, B, and C, right? A told B and B told C, I'll meet you at the top of the coconut tree. The next page. We said D to E, F, G. I'll beat you to the top of the coconut tree. All right, so we go through all the letters. So students are learning many things, right? they're starting to learn the letters, right? Maybe they're not reading these words, but you're reading aloud to them, and they're able to start to become familiar with the letters D, E, F, G. All right. So these are the types of activities that can really help, right, for students to begin to hear the language and to get that phonological and phonemic awareness. Now, of course, songs, children's songs are great for being able to build that phonemic awareness, right? And so why don't you, oh, someone says, what is the book name? Chicka, chicka, boom, boom. Yes, chicka, chicka, boom, boom. All right, so we can give you the names of all of these later as well if you forgot. So songs are great for building phonemic awareness. Students are then engaging in the songs. They love them. They give teachers an opportunity to be able to, point out the sounds. Why don't we sing this together? Are you ready to sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm with me? All right, now sing it loud so I can hear you. Ready? Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm he had some cows, E-I-E-I-O. With a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Great! Tell the truth, did you sing that out loud? Maybe you're in an office or at home and someone's looking at you a little strangely. That's okay, because what we're trying to do now is to demonstrate how songs can help build phonemic awareness and also teach, right, the sounds of that sort of long vowel sounds, E-I-E-I-O, which are also the names of the letters. Okay, and then it's easy to point out certain sounds, right, with the moo-moo, the right, ooh, and you can point out how those sounds start, right, and think about the sounds of English, the sound. What other words have moo, moo, McDonald? Good. Okay, so songs are a wonderful way. They're fun, they're engaging, they get kids to be able to use the language and start to become familiar with the sounds of English. All right, here's a fun game that you can play. It's like the hot potato game. You know that game, hot potato? Okay, so you pretend like you have a potato that's hot, right? You have to pass it to the next person, pass it to the next person. Okay, so in this case, in this game, children will sit on the floor, and then you're going to provide them a bag. So I have a bag here, okay, and the bag can have picture cards, or it can have objects, right, different ones. Obviously, those will be the vocabulary words you are learning or have learned, okay, and then you begin passing the bag around, okay, and then you'll play some music. Right? So here I've got a song. Okay, so you pass it, and then I get it, and I pass it, and it goes around the circle, and you pass the bag, and then you pass it again, and then when the music stops, when it stops, and I have the bag, then I get to reach in, okay, and see what's in it. Oh, I got a pig. Okay, so then the child says the name of the picture or object. In this case, it's a pig, and then says the beginning sound of the word, right? So you could say pig, p, p. Okay, or maybe there is a card in here. Oh, I do have a card in here too, and it's a duck. So I would say, I would identify the right English word, duck, and then say the beginning sound, duh, duh. Okay, so you see how it's just a really quick game. It's fun. Kids love to pass it when the music plays, and then you just give them additional practice to show that they understand that phoneme, right? That they can recognize that in the word. All right, great. So these are just some fun games that teachers often like to play, and also stories that they like to read that really helps build phonemic awareness. So of course, what we're trying to get to then is being able to understand the relationship between the letters, of the written language and the sounds of the spoken language. So once you've established these sounds, then you're going to start to attach the letters. And so phonics instruction, right, it's focusing on that one-to-one correspondence between the letters and the sounds. Okay, and so that's where we are now. So hopefully it's very clear what phonological awareness is, phonemic awareness, and then phonics. Okay, and so as you can see, it's very important in these early stages that we are teaching our preschool children, okay, who are in that early literacy stage, to understand, okay, what reading and writing can do. Just what is it, right? We want them to start naming and writing alphabet letters. They've got to hear rhymes and sounds in words, building that phonological awareness. They start to, start to write simple words. A lot of teachers start with students' own names, right? Because they're very familiar with the sound of their own name. And then we try to attach that, okay, to the letters of the new language. And of course, we also should be giving them plenty of chances to listen to the language in a story for meaning. Okay, because what we're going to start to get to is the importance of meaning. Okay, not just understanding these, small bits of language and putting them into words. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Okay, I just have, another song for you, which is great, right, when we're teaching kids letters and the sounds. Okay, and so why don't we sing it together? And you know how this song goes, right? Is that you take out the letter and clap and then say the rest. Okay, let's sing. That's right, Christina, let's sing. Okay, are you ready? I don't know. I didn't hear you singing. Are you singing? Okay, there was a farmer, had a dog, and Bingo was his name. Oh, B-I-N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name. Oh, there was a farmer, had a dog, and Bingo was his name. Oh, I-N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name. Oh, one more time. There was a farmer, had a dog, and Bingo was his name. Oh, N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name. Oh, all right, so it's fun, and then you get to the end where you're like, right? Because all of the letters of Bingo's name have disappeared. Okay, so this is such a fun and simple way to start to get kids to recognize how to spell things, right? They're just starting to learn the letters, okay? And then when you take one out, it's really fun for them to remember the rhythm of the song and the next letters, but what you're really doing is in a very sort of indirect or implicit way, teaching them, how to start to spell. Okay? So again, this sort of emerging or early literacy skills can be taught through song. And that's how they originated anyway, right? Okay, so what we're really talking about here now with these types of activities is actually what we call these dispositions of early literacy instruction, right? We're actually trying to cultivate, readers in our preschool children. Okay, so we're trying to make it fun and active. We're trying to cultivate their willingness to listen to stories, their desire to be read to, their curiosity about words and letters, exploration of print forms, playfulness with words, and enjoyment of songs, poems, rhymes, jingles, books, and even dramatic play. So it's these dispositions that are going to help you to actually build good and engaged readers. Okay, so that's why we have to make this type of instruction, right, fun for kids. All right. So now I have another poll, okay, because now we're getting into another aspect. So now we've gone through these early stages of literacy, and now I want to talk about learning L1 and L2. So true or false? It is detrimental to children to learn to read in their native language and a foreign language at the same time. Okay, so it is detrimental to children to learn to read in their native language and a foreign language at the same time. Let me get the poll out so you can put in your vote. Okay, here we go. Okay. About 20% of you have voted. It's amazing. There are 182 of us here. All right, so I'm going to close the voting. Get your vote in there. I'm going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And end the voting now. Okay, and so here are the results. And so the majority of you said false. Okay, and I see that some of you are saying, Alejandro says, I learned both at the same time 56 years ago. And why not, right? Okay, so of course, it is false, right? And children can transfer literacy skills successfully between the two languages. Okay, we already established that having literacy in L1 is an asset, right, for learning literacy in a second or a foreign language. Okay, but even though there's no level of L2 or proficiency specified for success in literacy instruction, there is support for L2 literacy instruction for very young learners who have not yet become literate in L1 or the native language. So there are some studies that show that very young children learning literacy in 2 different languages, their home language and a second language, could transfer literacy skills successfully between the 2 languages. So the transfer of literacy skills is bidirectional. It can go from L1 to L2 and then from L2 to L1. And the language of initial literacy does not necessarily need to be the student's L1. Okay, so some say that actually you wouldn't necessarily have to begin literacy in the L1. Okay, so that's a very interesting point of view. What we definitely can take from the research that's been done is that, okay, these literacy skills are bidirectional. So very important to remember that's not detrimental. Sometimes parents of your students worry when they're very young that they haven't learned to read and write in their native language and are worried about literacy instruction in English interfering with that. But you can tell them that they have no cause to worry, but that they should be, basically learning those literacy skills in both languages, which is the ideal situation. All right. Now, studies also have shown that integrating reading and writing has benefits for young learners, including assisting in oral language development. That's why we're always talking about skills integration, because they can help each other. All right, so if we're making the case for EFL literacy instruction, okay, for sure, literacy instruction should be an integral part of an EFL program for young learners. And integrating literacy instruction can actually assist in oral language development. And we also need to make sure that our literacy instruction is meaning, focused, and balanced, right? And what do I mean by balanced? What do I mean by balanced? Okay, so there was, and it's actually still ongoing. I was going to say, for many years there has been. It's an ongoing debate about the benefits of phonics instruction versus whole language. Okay, and so it's been going on, I think, for decades. And educators, some have very strong points of view about one being more effective than the other. And of course, the phonics approach, right, that focuses on bottom-up processing skills, right? So if you will, phonics, right, that's bottom-up, right? You're starting with the sound-symbol relationship, Okay, and you are, teaching that in order to decode written language. Okay, and that starts, as we said, with phonemic awareness, which helps children discriminate sounds in English, and then moves on to understanding that relationship between, sound and the letter. But of course, whole language is more top down. Okay, I'll go back to this slide. It's top down. And so that's focused on sort of the meaning of the text first, rather than decoding from letter to word to meaning. Okay, so that's what we mean by top-down approach. Okay, it's starting from children's knowledge of the world and experience with language and text, and build strategies for making meaning through that text. Okay, so, and of course, I just am curious, in your context, I would like to know which is emphasized more in your EFL literacy program. Okay, which is more. All right, so let's just do this poll real quick. Okay, because I'm just curious what you are focusing on. Okay. And I'm thinking that, we might see kind of a balance of both. But if you had to choose one, which one's more emphasized? All right. So I'm going to, this is very interesting. I'm going to end the voting. Get your vote in there. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and so as you can see the results, okay, so there are more people focused on whole language versus phonics. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there. That's interesting. So it seems like there's somewhat of an balance there. Maybe you use both, but maybe you emphasize whole language or phonics more. Okay, but the whole idea is that what we really want to do is make sure we have a balanced literacy approach, right? Because both aspects, right, taking a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach are very important. Okay, and a lot of times when I look at programs, they're very much focused on, the phonics or these bottom-up skills to decode the language, and not necessarily enough with the whole language, right? Or the top-down strategies for making meaning from text. Okay, so I have here some helpful building blocks, and I don't have that much time left, so I'm going to be kind of going through them rather quickly. Okay, but I did want to say that the first one that I'm going to point out is what I see definitely, a part of EFL, Young Learner Instruction, which is explicit instruction in phonics. That is one part of a balanced literacy approach. It is very important, right? Students need bottom-up skills to decode and spell words, especially English has 26 letters, representing 44 sounds, with more than 500 ways to spell them. Can you imagine? Okay, English is not so easy to learn. So phonics instruction, it also can differ depending on the writing system and your literacy practices, right? So if you actually, are a Chinese speaker or Arabic speaker, right, you use a completely different writing system. So it really is dependent on the native language. Okay, so I don't get into telling people exactly how to give phonics instruction because sometimes that depends on your native language and where you come from. Okay, I do want to say that I'll start with the top-down approach, okay? Because I do see this bottom-up approach a lot. And one thing you absolutely have to do for young learners is to immerse them in print and literature. Okay, so you want to make sure that they're surrounded by print in their environment, there's print on the walls in the environment, and also that you're making a variety of texts available, right? Like picture books, okay, and all different types of texts. Okay, so if you're able to create, okay, in your classroom, print on the walls, and having, reading centers where students can sit and choose books and read, very important. So you want to immerse students in print and literature. Another thing that you want to make sure you're doing is to utilize and build students' background knowledge. So one is utilize their background knowledge. The other is to build their background knowledge to understand text because they're very young and may not be exposed to a lot in the world. So you want to tap into their prior experience. You might be connecting to content, right, like science or social studies, making those cross-curricular connections, and also building their cultural knowledge to read stories across cultures. Okay, so you might start with like familiar books, right, such as like The Three Pigs or like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? These are very familiar. And then you might also be connecting to content areas, right? So they're learning about different animals, so you might want to be connecting them to the different animals and reading them stories that are related to the animals that they're learning about, okay? And also building cultural information as well, okay? So when you're learning about things like, okay, maybe you're doing a unit on toys and you're going to read a story about toys. You might also want to build their content knowledge about toys that come from other cultures. This is actually a big book that comes from our world. And, we present in here in this big book, facts about dolls, toys in other countries. So you can see here from Russia, okay, and from India, okay, and from Central America. So we want to build their content knowledge, cross-curricular knowledge, as well as culture through reading. All right, so next, we want to make sure we're modeling various reading and writing strategies. Okay, so we want to make sure that students are able to recognize text structure and are previewing the text and examining the surrounding pictures and predicting what's happening next. Right? We want them to also be able to write for a particular audience and purpose and pay attention to that. So of course, when you are reading stories, you want them to always remember, and you start them out with previewing the text. What do you see here? Ah, a frog. What color is the frog? Is this frog big or little? Okay, and then you can see the title is A Big Lesson for Little Frog. All right, so previewing it, you can even take them through the pictures in the text without reading it, and at first just preview the pictures and say, what animals do you see in here? And students can try to guess what's going to happen next. All right, so we want to model these various strategies all the time. Okay, now, moving on. Another very important point. Building vocabulary and automaticity of high-frequency words. Okay, something that research tells us, research by Pollination tells us that readers need to know at least 95 to 98% of the words in a text to gain comprehension independently. That is virtually all the words. Okay, and so it's very difficult. Now that is to gain comprehension of text independently. That is why you as a teacher will be doing things like shared reading and helping students gain comprehension of text. But when you want to encourage them to read independently, you need to prepare them for it. And also provide them with books, right? So the books that I have in my book series, Our World, all of the books are actually connected with a unit in the book series in Our World. And so therefore, the vocabulary words used, the majority of the words in the storybook are from the unit, right, in the student book. And so what we're trying to do is provide a context that's fun and interesting for students to be able to gain comprehension of text. And then when we do the shared reading, we're helping them to build reading strategies to make meaning from the text, right? And then hopefully to be able to read it independently later. Now, you may know this, but the 100 most frequently used words in the English language actually represent 50% of all written text. That's all. Okay, and most of the books, right, that have been written for children, especially in our series, for example, use these frequently used words. Okay, so One way that you can help your students read better is to build that automatic recognition of the words. Okay, so for example, they have these lists like the Fry sight words. Okay, these are the first most frequently used 100 words. If students can recognize them automatically, right, just with flashcards, then they're going to be able to recognize so much of the text that's in the books that you give them. All right. So keeping all this in mind, of course, when you are trying to build a balanced literacy program, you always have to come back to looking at your young learners, right? And our young learners, they're active learners and thinkers. They're social learners. And so you have to make sure that they're actively involved in the learning process with literacy. Okay, and we know that they need scaffolding from you, right? We just talked about that, right? That the teacher needs to be able to assist students through shared reading, right? By helping to make the input comprehensible in order to help them to become independent readers. So we're nearing the end of our time together, but I did want to point out, and you guys are going to be getting a reading that talks all about these different ways to approach literacy instruction with your young learners.